What do you have to say about current events nowadays? Hey guys, what's up? This is episode 16 of the Solo Soulscast, and I'm pretty excited about that number because that is 16. That's 2 more episodes than we were able to do with the Soulscast, the regular one, before it went on indefinite hiatus. And 16 is how old you need to be to drive a car, and it's also when you lose your period, apparently. This episode might get off the rails a little bit because there's someone sitting next to me that I'm not going to name names, but she might be talking in the background. And I've already lost my train of thought. Yeah, this is episode 16, so thank you for joining me. Thanks for being here for 16 crazy episodes, and maybe we can do 16 more. Maybe. 32 would be a pretty cool number. That's almost how old I am. Sort of. Not really. Let's get into it, shall we? My name's Shane. You guys know that. It's a lot of vowels. Shane does not have that many vowels. It has 2. That's, what, 2/5 of my name is vowels? My name is Shane. You can find me on social media. Instagram is Calamite, Kalameet. Twitter is also Calamite. Just replace the L with a 1. Someone has the Calamite handle, and I don't think it's been in use for years and years and years. So I'm pretty annoyed that I can't get it. Maybe I should check again. And YouTube, which is where you're most likely listening/watching this, is VG Bosses 24/7. Been posting boss battles. It's been almost all Dark Souls 3. I actually did post a couple Bloodborne battles tonight. I still have a few bosses from the Chalice dungeons that when I played through originally last year, I never fought and recorded. So I have a couple of those that I'm going to be uploading tonight and probably tomorrow. And that's social media, which is a great thing that everyone loves. What have I been playing recently? Well, the answer is Dark Souls 3. I'm going to say Doom as well. I started Doom. I played it for about 15 minutes, and I haven't touched it since. It seems like it will be pretty good. I started the single-player campaign. I don't think I have any desire to do the multiplayer. But single-player seems cool, so I will hopefully play that again at some point in the next week. I've had it for almost a week, and I played it for 15 minutes. And that's basically it. I do still plan on playing WWE 2K16. I haven't played it since I bought it and played it with my friend that we recorded and uploaded to my channel. I haven't played it since then. I will. I just, like I said last episode, just not enough time. Not enough time to play anything more than Dark Souls 3. And now that I've realized to get the Platinum Trophy, I got to play through and beat it 3 full times. I will be playing Dark Souls 3 for a while. But we're actually not talking about Dark Souls 3 today. I wanted to take a tiny break from it because the last 3 or 4 episodes have been Dark Souls 3, and I can foresee several more episodes in the next month also being Dark Souls 3. Next week's episode is going to, well, actually won't be that much Dark Souls 3, but this week I wanted to take a break from that. And I was kind of kicking around a couple ideas. I decided I want to talk about Bloodborne, and more specifically, I'd like to talk about the Bloodborne DLC that came out late last year, the Old Hunters. That was going to be my episode 2 of the Solo Soulscast way back in November when I started it, as I've explained probably several times. And I probably will stop explaining at this point, but I recorded one back in, I think, November, episode 1, and then my plan at that time was to record them every week, as I'm doing now. Episode 2 was about the Old Hunters DLC. I recorded the whole thing. It was probably 40 minutes long, but I deleted it because I thought it was garbage. I didn't like it. And then I stopped doing the Solo Soulscast until just when I started it back up a few months ago. So I'm going to go back to that Old Hunters DLC now. The only thing, the only advantage I had back then was I was fresh off of playing it, so it was very fresh in my mind. I haven't played the Old Hunters DLC since it came out in November, so it's going to be a little tough. I mean, it's not going to be that tough because I remember a lot from it, but it's not super fresh in my mind. So bear with me a little bit. But I'm going to kind of go over the DLC, you know, the look of it, the feel of it, my general thoughts. I'm talking about the difficulty, the bosses for sure, because there's some great ones. You know, just general stuff. Kind of like I did with the Dark Souls 3 DLC. It won't be as long because that was 3 separate DLCs that I kind of crammed into one episode. But let's get going, shall we? This this DLC, I have the wiki open too, and that'll be kind of helpful. I'm hoping it will actually tell me when it came out. You would think that it would just tell you right on the front page. Oh, it came out November 24th, which that sounds right. Which obviously it should be right since it's on the wiki. Everyone knows Wikipedias are rock solid. It's actually
the
pretty. Background person, yeah. And it's now officially midnight. So this is a very, very late episode that I'm recording. Usually I record them at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, so this is uncharted territory. Yes. Please say that again.
I don't want to.
Okay, well then, stop. She's making fun of me because I always fall asleep, and it's midnight and I'm still awake. How much am I going to cut out, I wonder? Okay, I'm going to kind of start the whole section over again. No, it's fine. It's fine. I won't put the mic up to your face anymore. It came out November 24th. Okay, guys, it came out on November fucking 24th, 2015, and it was $20, which I was going to complain about because that's 1/3 of the price of the actual game for like a DLC that, you know, for DLC standards is actually decently long. It's a good 10 or 12 hours, I think, at least. I was going to say that's kind of a high price, but I guess it really isn't. I mean, 12 hours is probably close to 1/3 of the time you would take to play through and beat the game if you're not doing a bunch of extra stuff. I don't know. So it's 20. I bought it. I believe I bought it the day it came out, downloaded it the day it came out. When you bought it, you got an item, I think right in your inventory, or you could pick it up from the Hunter's Dream, that allowed you to go to the DLC. I believe the only prerequisite is you have to have killed Vicar Amelia. So it's not like some of the other, it's not like Dark Souls 1 and 2, which Dark Souls 1 had a very convoluted way to get to the DLC. Dark Souls 2 was easier, but it was still kind of hidden. This was just an item, and then a new gravestone appeared in the Hunter's Dream up near one of the doors in the workshop, near the Bath Messengers that sell the stuff that costs insight instead of the blood echoes. So yeah, you just go to that, and then I believe you can just warp right from there. So it brings you to a place called the Hunter's Nightmare, which is a pretty interesting name. Admittedly, I don't really know the story, as I don't fully know the story for Bloodborne. So I don't know what the Hunter's Nightmare means entirely. I know the DLC has to do with both the Hunter aspect and then the Great One Cosmic Horror aspect, because towards the end of the DLC, you basically fight one of those kind of cosmic monsters. But you go to the Hunter's Nightmare, which is, oh boy, I'm gonna actually look it up too, but I want to say it's like the church ward or whatever. No, cathedral ward. I think it's kind of like an upper cathedral ward. It is that area, but it's like it's all decayed and destroyed, and I think there's different parts of it opened up, so it might be the same area, but it looks very, very different. and that keeps it from being, you know, like stale. Because I don't like games where you play through an area and then have to go and play through that area again for whatever reason, like needless backtracking to just pad out the length of the game. Odin Chapel is kind of where you start. Yeah, Cathedral Ward. It says right here, come out of the chapel to find a broken, warped, and overgrown version of Cathedral Ward. The overall geography is largely the same, but much has changed. So you're in the same kind of area, but it looks pretty different. There's lots of blood everywhere, and you will find a river of blood at some point, which is close to the first boss, which is pretty cool. So it has that same kind of Bloodborne aesthetic where it's got some of the gothic stuff. It has the same kind of geography. It's got the blood. It has, you know, the monsters, but it's considerably more decayed and destroyed. It's more what the hell's the word? It's in a even more of a dire situation, if that can even be possible. So you fight through this area, then you'll end up getting to the research hall, which is the next area. There's like 4 or 5 like big areas that you go to. Well, maybe there's only really 3 areas, but there's a bunch of different lamps at any rate. And the research hall is similar to the college from the main game. I don't know if it's actually the exact same as the college in the way that the beginning is the same as the Cathedral Ward, but it's very similar. It's a big giant building. It's got lots of staircases everywhere. It looks like an old, you know, school or college or something like that. It's a really cool area. So once you go through that, you fight 2 bosses there. In the first area, you fight 1 boss, and then you fight 2 bosses here, and then you go through to definitely a totally new area called the Fishing Hamlet. And this is I like this area a lot. It's very unique for a Souls game, and especially for Bloodborne. It's a hamlet, so it's like a village, but it's filled with water that's like up to your ankles at least. So it's got like a drowned kind of aesthetic, and you fight basically like anthropomorphic fish men enemies. They have like big spears. They're really cool. There's also the giants that you find kind of throughout the rest of the game, but they're giant fish. So they're these huge giants that are, I don't know, 2 or 3 times taller than you, but they're giant fish, and they're very, very difficult, as the giants tend to be in that game. And so you fight your way through this, and then you're basically at the end of the end of the DLC. And then after that, you can, you know, still go wherever you want. There's still an optional boss to fight after that. I don't think you can fight him until you beat the boss of the DLC, like the final boss. That's the general gist of everything. That wasn't a very good description, but I'm sure everyone listening has played it or at least knows about it. But keep losing my train of thought here. 17 minutes, okay. So it's not drastically different, the look and the feel of it. It's definitely Bloodborne, but they're nice additions to the main game. Like I said, you retread some of the same areas. Probably like half the DLC is an area from the main game, but it's been altered and changed in such a way that it feels like a new area. So you don't get exhausted from having to go through it again. And overall, it's effective. Again, it's called The Hunter's Nightmare, so it's, you know, good things are not happening there. Now, some of the things they did with the DLC, obviously, as with any DLC, I imagine, they added the new areas, new enemies, new bosses, new NPCs, new weapons, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. They expanded on the story, which is, you know, typical DLC kind of stuff. The weapons is what I want to talk about now, because they kind of added a lot of them. One of the main things that a lot of people complained about when Bloodborne first came out, one of the only complaints I think, and myself included, at least at the time, was the amount of weapons or lack thereof, compared to the Souls games that came before, Dark Souls 1 and 2, and even Demon Souls. There was very, very few weapons in Bloodborne. Now they all transformed into a second form, so each weapon was essentially 2 weapons. But the main game, including guns, has 26 weapons. But that is including both the torch and the hunter's torch and that wooden shield. So really it's like 23 weapons. But if each weapon has 2 forms, that's like 46. So the main game has 23 weapons, 46 if you want to count each weapon as 2. I mean, that's a small amount when you think of like Dark Souls 1 or 2, which probably has just 23 different swords, let alone every other weapon and every other shield and all that kind of stuff. So those games have like hundreds of weapons. But I think they kind of heard fans' complaints because they added a lot of weapons. They added 16 weapons just for the DLC. Just for like the 10 or 12 hours of the DLC, they added 16 weapons, which is pretty great. And they added some pretty cool ones. They added a couple that are similar to... No, well, I'm going to just go to the weapons page real quick. They added some that were pretty similar to other weapons in the main game already. Like blade kind of weapons and swords. Yeah, so they added some that were kind of similar, like the Beast Hunter Safe and the Beast Cutter. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. SAIF. Safe. I don't know. That's a dumb word. And those are kind of similar to some weapons that are already in the game. The Church Pick. But then they've added some pretty interesting ones, like the Whirligig Saw, which is a... Yeah, it's like a mace. So it's like a mace, and then you carry this like big saw, I think, on your back, and then when you transform, you basically have like a saw on a stick. It's really cool. So you swing it around. It's a slower weapon, but it's very cool. It's very unique. Not a weapon I've really seen kind of in any other games. There's Simon's Bow Blade, which is a cool sword, but then it transforms into a bow and arrow, which is pretty great. I haven't really used it, so I don't know how well it works. I still am sticking with my stake driver, because I love that weapon a lot. There's the Rikuyo, which is a boss weapon. It's like it's a sword that you can swing, obviously, because you can swing most swords. But you can split it in half, and then it's two really fast, kind of smaller daggers, which I guess is kind of like some of the other weapons in the game. It's really cool though. It's a good weapon. Then the Holy Moonlight Sword, which is a Souls, not even Souls, it's a FromSoft staple in basically all their games. So it's cool that they include it here. Again, I haven't used it, so I don't know exactly how it works. They have one called the Cost Parasite, which is... I haven't used it. I know it's very, very strange. It's like this bug thing that you have on your arm, maybe, and you just swing it around. It's very, very weird. And it says the information on the wiki. It transforms from a right-hand tentacle to dual-wield tentacles. There's this weird tentacle. It's like a living thing that you're just swinging around. So it's super odd. But it's really cool. They really thought outside the box for some of these weapons. And then there's one called the Boom Hammer, the final one I'm going to talk about, which is just kind of a hammer that you swing around, but you can, I believe, set it on fire. The transform thing, gives fire to it. I actually use that a little bit tonight. in the video that I recorded for this podcast, because if you're watching the video, it's all just fighting in the Chalice dungeons, but I went to a layer 1 Chalice dungeon, and I'm way over leveled for layer 1. So instead of using my stake driver plus 10, because that's kills everything in one hit and it's boring, I decided to use the boom hammer, completely unupgraded and without any kind of blood gems or anything, and that made it a little bit more difficult. I fought a couple bosses with it. My stake driver would take off like, I don't know, almost 500 hit points, and I think the boom hammer, without any upgrades, was taking off like 90, so it was a decent little handicap. Yeah, so that's the weapon. So the whole point is they added a bunch of weapons, and they added some really, really cool weapons, and I'm really happy about that. Even though I basically haven't used any of them, I'm still happy that they did it. Because... oh, that's the other one. Phew. I'm really happy they did it because it's nice to have more weapons. I don't know if they purposely added them because people were bitching that there weren't enough weapons, or they wanted to do it completely coincidentally, but it's a good thing. I feel like I should start a new playthrough or something and actually use one of those weapons instead of my stake driver. I'm just so attached to the stake driver. It's so good. It swings so fast and it's so strong. Even though you have 0 range, you have to be right up in their faces, basically. Oh, they released some... not released, but they did more firearms as well, which I haven't touched. But there's like a Gatling gun, which seems pretty neat. There's like a fist weapon, where it's almost like brass knuckles. I haven't used that, but I can't imagine it's very good. I think they added like 4 or 5 new firearms. They added another shield, which is interesting. All great weapons. Now, the weapons are one big thing that they added, which was not much needed. I'm over being annoyed that the game doesn't have that much weapons. Bloodborne doesn't need to have 15 different swords and axes and hammers and all that kind of stuff. But much appreciated, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Now, they added another thing called the League, which is a covenant, or whatever they're called in that game. I don't think they're actually called covenants, I don't remember. But I think Bloodborne only has like 2 or 3 of them anyway. But it's something they added in a patch before the DLC came out, which I think you can actually use without the DLC. So this might not entirely apply to the DLC, but I'm just going to talk about it anyway. But it's like a covenant you can add that you can be a part of that lets you do a couple different things. You can summon additional NPCs throughout the game to help you if you need it. I guess there's like a bunch that get unlocked because they're all part of this same league. They have some sort of online leaderboard that seems pretty un-Souls-like to have a leaderboard. That seems more like a Call of Duty kind of thing. I never actually looked at it. I don't know what it's all about. But I think this league is based mostly on co-op because it's all the descriptions and everything talk about how it's a covenant that you can help out your fellow hunters and all that. So that's a pretty big thing they added. Certainly a big thing they've added, which I really liked, which is something that I always focus on in any game, are the bosses. And there are 5 bosses they added for the DLC. I think that's pretty damn good. Because again, it's like 10 or 12 hours and they added 5 bosses. The Dark Souls 1 DLC was probably a similar length, and that had 4 new bosses. And then each of the 3 Dark Souls 2 DLCs was a tiny bit shorter, maybe 8 to 10 hours, but those each had 3 different bosses. So this has 5. That's a good amount. And they are not messing around. They are very, very hard. There's 5 of them, and I would say 3 of them are some of the hardest bosses in the entire game. Between the main game and the DLC and optional areas and the chalice dungeons, they're very, very, very hard. And before I get into them, speaking of just difficulty in general. I'm going to talk briefly about the difficulty. On the whole, I'd say the DLC is about as tough as the regular Bloodborne main game. It has a couple parts that are tough. The fish hamlet I remember being pretty hard. There's one part in particular where you can go down a well and there's 2 of the giant fish that you have to fight at the same time. You have to fight them in order to get a weapon, the Rikuyo, I believe. And it's very, very, very hard. That's probably the single hardest non-boss part in the whole DLC. But the DLC is, it's pretty tough. It's standard standard Bloodborne difficulty. But going back to the bosses, they're unbelievably difficult. Or at least I thought so. You start off fighting Ludwig, who's mentioned in the main game. He is the first boss you fight. He's like a big, deformed horse, 2-headed horse kind of thing. He's really weird. And he talks kind of weird too. But you fight him. He starts off, his name is Ludwig the Accursed. And he's really fast, and he's typical of a Bloodborne boss in that aspect where he's really fast. He does a lot of damage. His attacks hurt. You get him down to about half health, and there's a cutscene, which doesn't happen very often in these games, where you get a little cutscene in the middle of a boss battle. I think it kind of happens a lot in Dark Souls 3, at least in 2 or 3 battles. But you get him down to half health, and he falls, and he looks over, and he has the Moonlight Greatsword, and he basically says "Oh, I've had you all along." And it's really cool. I like it a lot because it's different, and it has this weird air to it. I like it. So the second half of the battle, instead of being on all 4s or 6s, I don't know how many arms he has. Oh, this one's going to take a long time to edit because I have a lot of long pauses where I've been yawning. Like I said, it's now 12:30, so it's way past my bedtime. But Ludwig then stands up, and he has his Moonlight Sword, which he attacks with. I actually think that part of the battle is a little easier than the first part. The sword swings are generally easier to dodge. You can kind of dodge right through them. He has one attack where I think he charges it up and slams it onto the ground. And if you get caught in that, you are absolutely dead. I don't think there's any way you could possibly survive it. So you beat him. Then you go through the research hall, and you get to Lumen Flower Garden, which looks similar to the area where you fight the Celestial Emissary boss in the main game. And here you fight the second boss. It's called the Living Failures. And they're the big alien-looking guys. And I believe they're failed attempts at trying to create a great one. So they're living failures. And they gang up on you. I think there's a bunch of them, but they share a health bar. So you just have to keep killing them as they pop up. They're not too hard. I think they're maybe the easiest in the whole DLC. Although the next boss, which is almost right after that, Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, is the only boss that I beat on my first try. And that's a boss that is very Bloodborne, but it also reminds me a lot of maybe a Devil May Cry, or even a Bayonetta or something. Because it's this woman, and she has that sword that I talked about before, the Rikuyo, however you pronounce it, where it's one sword, but then you can split it into dual-wielding smaller swords. She's very, very fast, one of the fastest bosses in the whole game, and she just swings that sword non-stop. She's very aggressive, so it really reminds me of a really fast-paced hack-and-slash game, kind of like a Devil May Cry or something like that. I beat her on my first try, but she's pretty hard. She imbues her sword with blood maybe halfway through it or something, and then her sword swings have blood trails that you have to dodge, and it's tough. It's really fun. I liked it a lot. So once you beat her, you have to go through the fishing hamlet, and then you get to the coast, where you see this big giant gross fish thing washed up on the shore, and that initiates the final mandatory battle of the DLC with the Orphan of Kos. and it has a little cutscene before the battle, which is really cool and kind of disturbing. There's this big dead-looking fish thing. It looks almost like maybe a manta ray or something. I'm pretty sure it's another great one. You know, that's the whole cosmic horror, Cthulhu kind of great one thing. And it like gives birth to this weird humanoid creature. And that's the boss you have to fight. And he has this, it's like a sword, but it looks like it's like a, it looks like an organ of some sort. It's like red, and it looks like it could be alive, or organic at least. And he swings it around, and it's on some sort of like chain or a string, so he can like throw it out to you and then have it retract back to him. He's very, very hard. I'd put him at least as difficult as Ludwig, maybe a little tougher. Maybe not. Ludwig probably took me more attempts to beat, but Orphan is very, very hard. Again, he's fast. He has a lot of moves. I believe he has a couple of moves that are hard to dodge, like the timing is weird. So you just need to be on your toes, which is true of probably every single boss in Bloodborne. You really need to be on your toes. So you beat him, and the DLC is essentially over. But there's still one more optional boss that you can go fight. You fight him back in the first area, the Hunter's Nightmare, and his name is Lawrence the First Vicar. And it's actually just a cleric beast, but it's on fire. So it's like a fiery cleric beast. So in that aspect, it's actually pretty disappointing that it's just a reskin. But I don't really think there's any other reskins in the game. Some Chalice Dungeon bosses kind of are, actually. But for the most part, there's none. So I'm fine with that. But he's the hardest boss in the DLC, I think. He took me more tries than any of the others. Maybe any of the others put together. Because Cleric Beast, you know, isn't too hard. But this one, maybe he's more aggressive. Maybe he's just more intimidating because he's on fire. But, you know, he has... I think he might have a few different attacks than the Cleric Beast. But he swings his big arm real fast. Oh, guys, I cannot stop yawning. I cannot stay up late. I'm not a person that can do it. I'm jealous of people that can stay up till like 2 or 3 in the morning. I do it so rarely. I try. I'd like to play Dark Souls 3 once I finish this, but I don't know how long I'll be doing that. And I'm at the Nameless King, so that's fun. But that's talk for another day. Well, Lawrence is Cleric Beast. He might have a few new moves, a few new AoE moves or something. He's Cleric Beast on fire. When you get him maybe 2/3 of the way down his health bar, he like falls on the ground and his legs are like gone. You like cut him off or damage him and they're like gone. So he crawls around, and you would think that would make the battle easier, but it actually makes it quite a bit more difficult. Because now he's just like spewing lava all over the place. So it's dangerous to even get close to him because lava comes out of him. He doesn't attack where he just like spews it all over the ground. And if you touch it, it hurts you. So it's very hard to get close to him. But he has other attacks where he shoots fire all over the place, and he's still swinging his big arm around. So he's very, very, very hard. If you go to my YouTube, VG Bosses 24/7, you can find my video of me beating him. It's quite exhilarating. But once you beat Lawrence, I think that's it. I don't think there's really anything else to do. But I like the difficulty of the bosses in the DLC. I think it's great. The Soul series tends to put its hardest bosses in the DLC. I mean, I think that's true of Dark Souls. Manus and Artorias and Calamite are some of the hardest bosses in that game. For Dark Souls 2, I'd say the Fume Knight, Alana and Slumbering Dragon Sin, and Alon are all the hardest bosses in those games, basically. And then those stupid bosses from the Snowy DLC, the Ivory King, the giant invisible tiger, and then the burnt Ivory King himself is pretty annoying. So the point is, they like to put some of their hardest bosses in the DLC, and Bloodborne is no exception. And I assume Dark Souls 3 will be no exception as well when those DLCs come out. But that is, let's see, we're looking at a good solid 40 minutes here. I wanted this episode to be a little more focused. I know I do a lot of rambling. I do a lot of there's a lot of dead space I have to cut from this episode. I thought I had more notes. I swear I wrote more notes, but then when I just opened my thing up an hour ago, it was pretty empty. So I like to do a quick summary and overview of everything now. The DLC is absolutely amazing. FromSoft knows how to do DLC. I know people were and probably still are against the Souls games having DLC. I had looked, and I said this in one of the Solo Soulscast episodes. I honestly don't remember which one, but I looked at old message boards for Demon Souls, and people were saying they didn't want that game to have DLC because there had been talk that the 6th Archstone that was broken was going to be like a portal to some DLC. And then I was reading in a original Dark Souls thread, people did not want DLC for that game. So I know some people are opposed to it, and in general I really don't care for DLC. A lot of it seems to be just a cash grab. Some studios do it right. The Borderlands DLC is always awesome. It always adds a huge amount of content, and it's fun to play through. I hear that Witcher 3 has a lot of awesome DLC, and obviously Souls games I think have great DLC. So I'm all for the DLCs. I have no problems with them. This DLC is amazing. It gives you everything that you love from the main game, and it gives you a little more. It gives you more weapons. It gives you some interesting new enemies. It gives you a couple good new locations. It gives amazing challenges with the new bosses. It gives you some new story tidbits. It gives you there's new like attire as well. I don't remember some of the attires because I don't really pay attention to them because they're just there. They don't really offer that much in the way of defense. But there's new ones. I believe you can get 1 or 2 more blood rocks, which is pretty cool. So the DLC is great. I would suggest it to anyone that loves Bloodborne and anyone that is able to, that has the $20 to buy it. I think there's some sort of Game of the Year edition out as well that has, you know, the DLC with it. I'm guessing it's the only DLC that Bloodborne is going to have. I don't think they're going to come out with any more. So this is it. There's Bloodborne, the main game, and then there's the DLC. I still think they should do some DLC for Chalice Dungeons, at least like one more DLC, or like a big patch or update or something. Because that's something they could do infinitely, really. Add new Chalice Dungeons, add new, maybe throw a couple new bosses, add new randomizations. I feel like those possibilities are endless. But, you know, how long are they going to just update a game that is already about 2 years old now? And I know people are still playing it, and it's still popular. But right now, everyone's on the Dark Souls 3 train. So I guess how much sense would it make to just keep releasing stuff for a game like that? I would welcome it. I would welcome anything. I would fucking play Demon Souls right now if they released Demon Souls DLC. Not that I wouldn't play Demon Souls anyway, because I've really been wanting to recently. I have a friend at work that is playing through Demon Souls. His first Souls game was Dark Souls 2, and then he played, I think, a little bit of Dark Souls 1, but he's played through and dominated Dark Souls 3, and he's played through most of Bloodborne. I think he's at Mikolash, and now he's playing Demon Souls. So I've been really wanting to play Demon Souls lately. I'm glad I kind of got my Bloodborne fix tonight. It's fun to jump back into it, even though it's a little bit different than Dark Souls 3. It took a couple minutes to adjust. I kind of forgot what some of the buttons did. And having triangle heal you instead of square. Because on PlayStation, Dark Souls 3, square is the button to use your consumable items. So that's, you know, where you use your Estus. And square, there's no Estus kind of things in Bloodborne. It's the blood vials, and those are automatically mapped to triangle. Which I like, I just forgot. So I used a couple items accidentally when I was trying to heal myself. But I don't know if there's much more I can say. I wanted this episode to be a little better. I feel like I can't record a good Old Hunters DLC episode. I'm not sure why. I think the problem is I really need to just sit down and replay it. Because by now, it came out November 24th. I played it for probably a week and a half or 2 weeks to play through and beat the whole thing. So, I haven't really played it since early December of 2015, and it's now basically the end of May. So I haven't played it in a long time, so my memory's kind of fuzzy, which sucks, because I kind of wish I had kept my recording from when I did it back in November, or at least made that recording better so it didn't suck so much. But this is the Old Hunters DLC episode you guys are getting. It's not the one you deserve, it's the one you need. Maybe 6 months, a year down the road, maybe I'll do another one. Maybe I'll just not re-record. I won't record over this. Maybe I'll do a new one. Old Hunters DLC. Take 2. This time I've actually played through it recently. But I think I covered kind of everything that's important about the game. They added a bunch of new weapons. They added the League Covenant. The bosses are awesome. They all look great. They're hard. They have pretty interesting stories. Bloodborne didn't add anything like drastically different. There's no new mechanics. There's no new things like that. It's the same game, just new areas. At least in Dark Souls 2 they tried to. Each DLC had kind of its own little thing, like mechanic, as I talked about in the Dark Souls 2 DLC episode. Like the first one, the Sunken King one, has all the pillars that you can move, and it changes geography and like moves things up and down. Well, the Iron King one has all those idols that buff the enemies that you have to kill, and then the Ivory King has all the snow and the ice that's blocking the way. So they did like kind of different things. Bloodborne is just straight picking up the Bloodborne formula and just dropping it into a new area, which I have no problem with. I love the DLC. It's one of my favorite DLCs. I don't know if I like it more than the Artorias DLC, but it's pretty damn close. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. I'm gonna say Old Hunters is great if you have Bloodborne and you love it, but you don't have the Old Hunters. Spare the $20 and get it. Not spare the $20. Scrounge up $20 and get it. And if you never played Bloodborne, what the hell's wrong with you? First of all, while you're listening to this podcast, play Bloodborne. But when you play it, get the DLC. Make it a full experience. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening. This is going to take me probably a long time to edit. I'll start right now. And I'll try to see how much Dark Souls 3 I can play before I fall asleep. But thanks for listening. Tune in next week for episode 17. I already have an idea of what I'm going to do. Hopefully, I can fill out my notes a little more. But, everyone, have a good night. If you're listening to this at night. If you're listening in the morning, then good morning. Thanks for coming here in the morning, I guess. And, yeah, that's everything. So, see you guys next week.